It's got a nice crisp to it. It actually has a nice little heat to it, but it's not overwhelming. Good flavor. Oh, of course, that's not all going to fit. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, I am making roast pork in spicy broth. If you're new here, I'm Catherine, the Aerogarden Homesteader, and this is one of the convenience meals that I have been sort of plowing my way through from the all-new Ball Book of Canning. This is a meal I have not tried before, and so I've kind of been curious about how some of these meals are, and I've been going through and doing the ones that I feel are interesting, you know, the ones that I think my family would like, or at least that I would like, and I've been making them. So I think this is one of the last ones from the book that I had planned to make that I have never made before, but I will be making some baked beans as well as a few other, probably just baked beans and meat pie filling. Meat pie filling is kind of it's a regional thing, so if you haven't had it, it's, you know, you've either had it or you haven't. Everyone's got some sort of meat pie type or hand pie type recipe in their family. This one, that'll just be mine. So this is, it says that you can use this to make like a pork taco. So that's what drew me to this recipe. It didn't sound interesting on its own. It was the fact that it came with a recipe on how to use it, and it was for like a pulled pork taco. We're not huge fans of pork. We do have pork. We eat it every once in a blue moon. We normally do it as pulled pork. But Boston butts are very fatty meat, and there's a lot of meat on it. So it's hard to eat in sort of a couple of meals without just getting absolutely sick of it. So I feel like this is probably the better way to go, is to just can it up, and then we've only got a small amount to eat. So this does call for an approximate 3-pound Boston butt. Now, as I said, Boston butts are kind of greasy. There's just lots of fat on it. This is I think it's a pork loin. No, it's a loin. It's slightly more than 3 pounds, but you know, by the time I get most of this fat, and there's a little bit of silver skin here I want to get off as well, this will probably be closer to 3 pounds than when I started. Plus, I am obviously not trimming very well. Now I need to get this cut up into 1.5-inch cubes, put some salt, pepper, and a touch of oil on it, and then I can put that in the oven to roast for half an hour. So it says to roast it at 425, so that's pretty high. It should have some browning going on, and I think that's the point, is you want some browning for the flavor. Okay, I think it's okay to have some fat on it. Obviously, Boston butts are really fatty, so I'm just going to go through and get this cut. Now this claims it will make 3 quart jars, so we shall see if that is true. So I'm going to get my hand all cleaned up. Actually, I decided not to clean my hand because I got to put this on and then toss it around. If I can get the jar open. Okay, well, it calls for a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of pepper. So we're just guessing on this. I couldn't get it open. This one, there we go. Yeah. And it says to drizzle with a tablespoon of oil. Again, I'm just going to kind of give a little guess on that. The pork will render out a little bit of fat as well, so this should help with the browning. Alright, so this will go in the oven, 425 for half an hour until browning occurs. I'll show you what it looks like when I move on to the next step. Okay, well, while the pork is in the oven, I want to get the sauce mixed up. So it does say to put in the remaining salt in here, so that's going to be a tablespoon total. I'm using pickling salt now. The other stuff was just coarse kosher salt. It doesn't have any iodine in it, so I don't have to worry about it clouding either, but do what you have. Calls for 2 tablespoons crushed red pepper flakes. That's probably where the spicy comes from. I guess we'll see how spicy my red pepper flakes actually are. 1½ tablespoon of dried oregano. I'm using Mexican oregano because it's just, that's what the dish kind of gives the flavor of to me if I'm going to be using it to make pulled pork for tacos. So then I need 3 cloves of minced garlic. Yes, I'm just using garlic from a jar. Use what you have. Do that. And 2 quarts of chicken stock. And then I just need to bring that up to a boil and simmer it. I will also need to cut in an onion. Almost forgot about the onion. It says to just do onion slices. And I do have my canner going, warming up with the jars in it, and I got some lids here ready to go. I have 3 quart jars and 1 pint jar just in case. So we'll see how that goes. I always put in an extra jar because you just never know. There's always a little something that you always end up with just a little bit extra. Doesn't hurt to have an extra jar prepared. Ooh, that's a potent onion. Okay, I'm going to get my stock in, and I'm going to get that up to a boil and then simmer it for 5 minutes, and hopefully by then the pork will be about ready to go. Okay, I hope that that's what they mean by browned, so I'm going to go ahead, and it says to fill the jars up halfway with pork. I took a chance and I heated up an extra quart jar just in case. I do have a pint jar heating, so we'll see, but it does say to fill them up about halfway with pork. This was slightly over the 3 pounds that it called for, so who knows, maybe I will actually get a 4th jar out of it. It did make a lot of broth. It calls for 2 quarts of chicken stock to make the broth. That's an awful lot, so I suspect that I might have some broth left over, but I guess we'll see. I guess the real question is how meaty do I want these, because I'm using it for tacos and I would like to not have a ton of leftovers. So that one's a little on the low side. Okay, so it might be that because I've got a little extra meat, yeah, probably just put them all in. So we will see how much broth gets left over. Alright, well that's 3. This one could use another piece. That one had too many in it anyways. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to get rid of this. Now it did render out some fat, so I will just let that cool a little bit and then put it in my grease pot. See? That made a lot of broth for just 3 jars. I would suggest if you're doing this, maybe only just use 1 pint of chicken stock. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of this pre-seasoned chicken stock. Guess we'll see how much it ends up using, but anyways. I'm going to try to divide up the onions a little bit so that it just doesn't end up all in one jar. Okay, this is messy. Ladles are kind of messy. You can always just dip and use a measuring cup, but I think that's just as messy, honestly. Doesn't help that I've got like my microwave shelf is right there, so I got to be careful how high I lift my hand. This is not a very well designed kitchen. I need 1 inch of headspace. Okay, I'm just there. Got some debubbling going on. Make sure my headspace didn't change. This one I think could use a little bit more. Yeah, just a tiny bit more. I don't know why, but I've noticed that the electric canner, I got an electric canner, and for some reason it doesn't seem to like the 1-inch headspace. I always get a little bit of squeeze out, so I do try to give it a slightly more generous headspace than it actually calls for. Especially with raw pack stuff, it just seems every single time. There. You get a cloth. Now this calls for an hour and 15 for the pint jars and an hour and a half for the quart jars. There we go. I will let you know how this turns out after it is all done. Oh, of course that's not all going to fit. I wanted to just pour the chunks in. I'm going to take off the extra broth. I want to make sure all the chunks are in here. I will try making a chicken soup with the leftover broth. Okay, I'm making the pork. So it says to put it in a pan and bring to a boil, and then drain it and put it in the oven for 20 minutes. So my oven is preheating. I'm going to get this up to a boil. It smells spicy. I actually tasted the broth, and the broth is really spicy. So my pepper flakes were on point for spice, I hope. So we'll see if everyone likes it. But in the meantime, I'm going to get this up to a boil, and then I will drain it, get it in the oven, and I'll show you the process, but I'll probably speed through this and just, you know, show you what the final product looks like, because that's really what we want to know. Okay, it's been simmering for about 10 minutes as called for. I'm going to remove the meat and broth. I'm actually going to turn it off. And then it says to shred the meat, put it back in the pan. It says to use a tinfoil lined tray, but why use a braising pan and not actually braising it? So I am going to pour the broth into the measuring cup. Then I'm going to pick out the chicken again, or sorry, the pork, and get it back in the pan and shredded. The oven is preheated to 375, so the point is to recreate carnitas, which are crispy. So it's going to go in the oven and be allowed to crisp up. Well, it seems like a pain, but at least I don't have to measure, I don't have to mess up a strainer to do this. Is all that. Okay. Oh, see, now that's really tender. It says 2 forks, but, well, it's just breaking apart. So, now it does say to reserve the liquid in case you want a little sauce with it, or if your meat dries out and you just want to moisten it up a little bit. So I will save that. I'm not sure what I'll do with it otherwise, but I guess we will figure something out. Make a spicy chicken soup. Get rid of this cold. Okay. In the oven it goes.
A few moments later.
So here it is from the oven, and I got some nice crisp around the edges. I did put in a small splash of the broth just to sort of loosen it up just a tiny bit. Not enough to make it really wet, but just to moisten it a little. And it made really good tacos. This might be my new favorite way of dealing with pork. So I highly recommend it. You should give this a try if you like pork in your tacos. It's got a nice crisp to it. It actually has a nice little heat to it, but it's not overwhelming. Good flavor. So yeah, I think I got more pork in the freezer. I'm probably going to have to make some more of this. I hope you give this recipe a try. Thank you so much for watching today. I will have some other videos up at the end that you might enjoy, and I will see you next time on the Aerogarden Homestead.